This is a note to self, and what I want to do in these kinds of videos is kind of read out or just recap some journaling that I did about myself as I'm trying to be more connected with myself, and hopefully it would inspire you all to do that same kind of introspection, because I think it's very important to be connected to and aware of who you are and the kind of things that influence you to do whatever it is that you do. So I'm gonna just read actually, and then I'll go back and kind of recap some things if I have anything else to say. If I'm to be connected with myself, I need to know who exactly I'm being connected to. I'm a very emotional person. I love things like art, music, movies, food because of how they make me and other people feel. Thinking about my career goals, it's always been about making people feel inspired or joyful or full of wonder, much less about whatever technical challenge there was. And I'm an engineering major. I really do feel emotions deeply, which ties into my own personal sensitivity. I feel terrible when I disappoint people or let them down. I'm very vulnerable to shame, and guilt can be excruciating for me. That can be hard at times. I may get upset with somebody for doing everything but handling the problem the way that they know that they need to do it. I brought up a specific example here. I may start sympathetic, but I can become hard, forceful, frustrated when it seems someone is set on choosing a more difficult path. Maybe that's because I care for them deeply. I don't know. When I look back on my life and I think about my emotionality, right? I was always the kid who, I was a crier when I was younger. I would always cry. And this isn't like, like toddler, like less than 5 kind of age. This is like 8, 9, 10-ish. Right. I would always cry, and I would hate when people would like talk to me for like a long time about something wrong that I did. Right? It wasn't that like, I didn't like the criticism. It would just be like it would reach a certain point where I felt like I was like I had already understood that I had done something wrong, that I had disappointed somebody, right? But like just being like, I guess, kind of not necessarily like beat over the head about it, because it wasn't, necessarily like aggressive, when like, my parents would do that. But it was more so like, it was just repetitive. It was like digging in, like adding salt to a wound, or like digging in a wound, keep messing with things. And that was difficult for me. That made it that hurt a lot, because I had already processed the fact that I had disappointed somebody, right? And in those moments, right, I would say I understood, right? As, like most kids do, but like I actually did. I would say I understood, and like I actually cared, and I felt bad and everything, and they would just keep going. And I don't do well with lectures, basically. And I would cry a lot. And, as I got older, being a guy, it became, I guess, valuable for me to kind of hide that side of myself, to kind of be more stoic, stone-faced. And that's just not me. That's just not me, and it never has been. And I think that a lot of people can say that it's not them. I think that we are all relatively emotional people, but people are just more inclined to hide that, for whatever reason. I just think that that's very interesting. And that's something that I want to really think about with myself, because as I go about, my friendships and my relationship with my parents, trying to heal those things and improve them, I can't go into that still moving as though I am kind of calloused or stoic or stone-faced, right? Because people don't know to be gentle with or take emotional inventory of someone who they think has incredibly thick skin or emotions that aren't as deep as they truly are. I also considered some like anger inside of me, which I'll kind of read out. I think I've always had a bit of a relationship with anger that is slow to burn. I can feel angry, but won't react on this anger until it's time for me to just about explode. I think that guilt and shame carry so much pain for me that if I'm not seen and shown compassion, like in the case of healthy shame, I may fight to be seen, defensiveness, or detach from my emotions, accept anger, and lash out. I get deeply agitated when people try to talk to me about things I feel shame about. I feel like I'm naked, being poked and prodded at in uncomfortable places. To be spoken to about something I feel shame about must be compassionate and sensitive to my own emotions, and I must be able to trust in that compassion from the beginning. It may take time for me to put that trust in somebody, but I know that that's a sticking point for me. When I think about this piece, genuinely, I'm not the kind of person that naturally gets angry quickly. I'm not a hothead, right? I can get frustrated when I'm not seen, when I don't feel seen, when I don't feel heard. Because that, like, those emotions and those feelings carry a lot of weight for me, even if I'm not fully capable of expressing them in like a very clear way. It means a lot to be seen, or for that space to be provided, and for that compassion to be there. Because if I do something wrong, my default is to be compassionate, right? Because that's the kind of space that I want to. That's the kind of space that I want to be there. I want it to be a compassionate and loving space still. Because at the end of the day, like, let's say I made a mistake or offended you in some way, that doesn't undermine the feeling of like love that I have towards that person, like a friend, my family. Like that's not the case, right? And when that space isn't there, when I'm not seen, when there isn't still compassion shown, that because that level of compassion shows that the relationship, the connection is bigger than the offense. And that's meaningful. It's like at the end of the day, the core is still there. We just have to deal with, this thing that is kind of trying to infiltrate the core of what, the relationship is. So that's something that I'm thinking about too. I need to continue to like investigate that and really like just pay attention to times where I start to feel frustrated or angry or agitated. Especially with just people who are my friends. Because I think my parents is a very interesting situation. I have so much like history with them, but with my friends I have a whole lot less. And if I start to see myself getting angry or like not extending that level of compassion, I need to know why. I also talked about losing people leaving my life. I take losing people too easily. My dad leaving on weekends to deploy made me kind of numb to people leaving my life. It's not that their presence didn't mean anything to me, but maybe my mind has been calloused from my father leaving. Maybe I accept people leaving in my life too easily and I don't fight for relationships like I should. Which begs the question, when do I fight and when do I walk away? So my father, very present father, like he's still in my life. I talk to my dad, right? But he, when I was 11, me and my mother moved to North Carolina and my dad was still stationed in Virginia. And they did this so that I wasn't moving from state to state every like 2 or 3 years. I could actually like make some friends, right? And develop my social skills like throughout middle school and high school and stuff like that, right? Like, good idea, right? But I didn't have my dad in the house as often anymore. He would come down on the weekends, like every other weekend. And like that was the time that I got to spend with my dad. And I remember it hurting a lot when he would like leave, like when he would go back to Virginia. And it sucked. and I remember it hurting, and then all of it, like, it just stopped at a certain point. Like, I was just like, okay, I'm gonna catch your dad. I'm gonna see. I think I remember one of the times where, like, I didn't even go downstairs to, like, say goodbye. I just, like, said it from upstairs, 'cause it was, like, that commonplace of a thing. And I'm wondering how much that affects me to this day. Like, do I hold on to relationships the way that I need to? Am I too okay with people leaving and me not knowing when I'm going to see them again? I don't know. I have to pay attention to stuff like that. And I need to fight for some relationships that are healthy, that are really truly worth fighting for, and see how that feels. See if that challenges me, if that scares me. Try to feel that. Yeah, I wrote about that as well. Another thing that I wrote is that I give a lot of power to feeling inadequate. I express competence in areas sometimes where the competence is lacking. I'll oversell myself sometimes. I want it to seem like I have it all together, and in reality, I don't always have it all together. I may give myself grace for that on my own, but my lack of confidence in myself and my lack of, like, real trust in others leads me to hide that incompetency. I'm vulnerable to and by myself and very few other people. I wrote a note, very interesting. I don't think I trust people to handle shaming me healthily, which catalyzes actions that may make people shame me more. And when I say healthy shame, I mean, like, I don't like what you did. I don't like that. That made me feel X, Y, and Z. Not, how could you do that? You are this kind of person for doing that. You know, the first one is fine. The second one is, it stings and it weighs on me for a very, very, very long time. And I've heard a lot of that in my life, and I don't know how much of that, I don't know how much I trust other people to not do that, because I have heard so much of that in my life. And I think that leads me to be kind of reserved on my own emotional front. And that's something where I have to gauge whether or not, like, when I can be that level of vulnerable, and actually gauge it accurately, and not just assume that everybody is not a safe space. But yeah. I'm emotional and sensitive, I'm emotional and sensitive, which are things I can embrace in all areas of my life, but that makes it scarier to be in relationship. How do I begin to trust people to deal with me in a healthier way, to handle my emotions in a healthier way? Firstly, I need to acknowledge my emotionality and sensitivity to myself and others. People won't deal gently with someone who seems to have thick skin. They don't know that that's what they need to do. So that's just kind of echoing a couple points that I've said earlier. And I guess I'll kind of wrap this up with a story. Last night, I was chilling with some of my friends at his apartment. We were just talking, and I ended up just kind of changing the tone of the conversation a little bit, talking about how, I wish my 2025 was a bit different. I wish I had made some different decisions, recognizing the kind of person that I am. If I'm going to recognize that, hey, I'm an emotional person, if I'm in a certain kind of situation, like, I'm going to respond in XYZ because I am an emotional person, I can better inform my decisions. I made decisions not taking into account who I really am. And I kind of was vulnerable about that. Said things like, had I known how emotional I was and how trusting people to deal with me, like, how scared I am to trust people to, like, shame me in, a healthy way, or really, like, give my emotions, like, the space that they need. If I knew that that was, like, a fear of mine, that is something that I could have smartly addressed, as opposed to just retreating in. And as I opened that kind of space, right, and we all kind of like shared a little bit, about how we felt, um, I felt very present in that moment. I felt very alive. I felt very connected to the people in the room. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do this year. And I think that I need to do more of that. I said authenticity is the first step to intimacy in any relationship. And I mean that in the sense of actually being close with a person. So that's something that I'm going to carry with me, I think. Yeah. That's a little note to self.